Restaurant operators and managers, believe me when I say that nothing is as vitally important than a menu designed for maximum profit. Fact is, many busy restaurants may be filling their seats but wondering why their bank account just isn't keeping pace. Well, the number one reason why is because their menu, the most important sales tool in any restaurant, just isn't maximizing profit. The menu may have been designed for variety and appeal to the customer perhaps, but profit is all over the place. I see these restaurants losing upwards of $10,000 per week and even more in lost potential profit. Follow me here. Every menu has categories in each restaurant. You know, appetizers, soups and salads, maybe sandwiches, entrees, desserts. The reality is every single day lower profit items are taking sales away from more profitable items. And in each category, the profit difference among these items is dollars and not cents. For example, a restaurant might have 5 appetizers on its menu. Every time the restaurant sells this appetizer versus the most profitable appetizer, they might be losing $3, $5, and more. On the entree side, it's even scarier. They might be losing $8, $10, $12, and more, simply because the biggest sellers are less profitable. Now, as long as the restaurant is paying its kitchen staff the highest wages to make anything, why wouldn't these restaurants want to design a menu where everything contributes a very similar profit, where that difference is cents and not dollars? This is absolutely possible. Now, this is also the biggest needle mover on profit and should be your biggest priority right now. In these uncertain times, nothing is more important for your restaurant to maximize sales each and every day, and more importantly, maximize profit on each and every sale. What business are you in and what are you selling? Now, this is not a trick question, but as you can imagine, the answer I mostly hear is, well, I'm a restaurant owner or a general manager and my products are food and drink. And that's when I stop people right there and I say, no, when I was in the restaurant business, I was not in the business of running a restaurant. I was in the business of running a business, and those are two separate things. And my products were not food and drink. They were entertainment, consistency, and a whole lot of good times. And that made a huge difference for me. So that's a little paradigm shift. The truth is, in this business, there are many restaurants that are losing lots and lots of money every single day simply because they don't have systems in place. Many of those are financial systems that are losing these restaurants money. So we're going to cover that in detail. Now, it's a fact that a menu is a restaurant's largest, biggest, most impactful marketing tool. These menus are not designed to maximize profit. They might be designed for variety and appeal to the guest, but the profit is all over the place. These restaurants are also lacking critical financial control systems, such as taking inventory, knowing what their prime cost is, as well as their daily break even. So these are some of the things that we will cover. Another question I usually ask restaurant owners, do you know what your most popular items are? Everyone can tell me that. Oh, this flies out of the kitchen. My guests would kill me if I took this off the menu. And then I ask a more telling question. What are your most profitable items? Have you even costed out your menu? And that's when you can see these people, the gears kind of grind to a halt and they can't tell me this. Well, I'm going to show you how you cost out a menu item in every individual category. Before we look at the spreadsheet, you're really going to need a couple of tools. You can get a calculator, a pencil, but most importantly, you're going to need your invoices. You purchase from a variety of suppliers, and they're going to provide you with an invoice that tells you exactly what the food item is, how it comes into your restaurant. Is it by the case? Is it by the number 10 can? And then it also tells you the price you pay for that. Now, every one of these spreadsheets that you're looking in front of you will apply to each individual menu item in each category. When I talk about categories, we're talking about appetizers. We're talking about perhaps soups and salads, sandwiches and burgers, pizzas, entrees, of course, desserts. All of these are categories, and it is vitally important that you have a cost sheet for every single item in each of those categories. Why? Now it's more important than ever because I find that lots of restaurants don't know what the profit is and if they're even making any money on every single item. Now, with rising costs and inflation, it's critically important that we know exactly how much every item costs us to serve the guest. And that's where this comes in. Besides the invoices, you might also ask your larger suppliers. If you work with the larger broadline suppliers, ask them for an order guide. Now, an order guide is a more detailed document that lists every single item that you buy from that supplier in greater detail. It's all itemized by food, by beverage, by supplies, but then it'll give you the cost information as well. You can do this exercise with either, but if you can get an order guide, all the better. So let's look at this individual spreadsheet. Now, these spreadsheets will be available to you at the end of the presentation. I'll tell you how you get them if you're interested. Otherwise, this is something that you can implement on your own if you choose to recreate it. Now, this is a plate cost for a pizza in a very, very popular pizzeria that my family and I go to quite often. My kids love the pizzas there. I think they're pretty amazing. And this is only weeks old. So this is accurate data. But let's look at this for a moment. On the left, you've got all the ingredients listed. Just to the right of that, you'll see how many ounces or units of an ingredient goes on this particular pizza. Just to the right of that, you'll see the cost per ounce, or what each individual ingredient costs times the amount of units or ounces on that pizza. And then to the right, this is an automatically calculating spreadsheet that does the math for you. Again, I mentioned it's so important to do this now more than ever because of rising costs. And you really need to find out which items are the most profitable, and I'll tell you why. But before we do that, you're going to literally go to the order guide. And what you need to do is reverse engineer one by one each individual menu item. Now, yes, this is going to take some time. Homework is involved. But once you have the system in place, it's always going to be there. And then you can use it every single time you add a new dish, or you can upgrade the ones that you have if prices go up or down. But anyway, reverse engineering the menu means you need to figure out the quantity of every single ingredient that goes on every single item that you serve the guests. So in this case, it's a pizza. So you go to the order guide or the invoice, and then you have to break down the case by literally how much yield comes out of that case in order to provide one individual pizza or menu item. And you need to do that for every single ingredient. So let's follow along. On the left, it starts with dough. Now, this particular restaurant makes their own dough fresh every single day, and they make it with water and flour and sugar and all that kind of stuff. But they've figured out that the cost of one dough ball, which is, you'll see it's 8 ounces, is 2 cents per ounce. That was simple math with a calculator and a pencil, just based on all the ingredients that go into the dough, okay? And now that, you'll see, is 16 cents cost just for the dough alone. Now, underneath that is olive oil. Now, they use 0.98 ounces at 19 cents an ounce, which is 19 cents on the very right of the spreadsheet. There's 2 different kinds of cheeses. There's Asiago and there's mozzarella. So let's look at the mozzarella. You'll see there's 4 ounces of mozzarella cheese. They've figured out that based on the large quantity that comes in a case, that it's 18 cents an ounce for 4 ounces. It automatically calculates 72 cents there. There's red sauce on the pizza. Now, what makes this pizza really unique is it's got mashed potato, bacon, and scallion. It's a really delicious pizza. They may sound like unusual ingredients, but again, every single ingredient on this pizza is listed along with the cost in each individual ingredient. Now, the pandemic has kind of shifted a lot of takeout, and curbside pickup and delivery and all of that. And now we're using takeout containers more than ever in our restaurants. So if something goes out the door, then you need to add the cost of the takeout container. In this case, there's a small pizza box that costs them 38 cents each. Again, simple math off their invoices or order guides. And now, this spreadsheet automatically adds up the total cost on the right side and gives you what is called a plate cost total, which is $2.80. That's what it costs this restaurant to serve the guests, just the ingredient cost. This has nothing to do with labor. This is just what it costs to put all those ingredients together and serve it to a customer. Now, if you're serving it in-house at a table, obviously that you do not include the takeout container or the box, only if it goes out the door as a takeout or a delivery or a pickup type item. Okay, so we've got our plate cost of $2.80. What does the restaurant charge for this pizza? $18. That's your menu cost. That's what the guest pays for it. Now, to determine the food cost, simple math is you divide the plate cost of $2.80 by the $18, and that gives you a 16% food cost. But again, this spreadsheet automatically calculates that. And then the simple profit calculation is you'll see that $15.20 is the profit. That is simply subtracting the plate cost of $2.80 from the menu cost that the customer pays of $18, and that gives you your $15.20 profit. So once again, for every single category and every single item in that category, it is vitally important that you cost out every item. You probably would like to work with your chef, your kitchen manager, or even the largest broadline suppliers. If you're a big customer of some of the larger suppliers out there, they have test kitchens, they have executive chefs, and if you're a good customer, if you've been doing business with them a while, then your sales rep can arrange a meeting, or they'll even do this remotely for you, and they can help you cost out your menu. Again, you don't ask, you don't get, but it all depends on how you want to approach this. But again, super important to do this exercise. That leads to the next piece. Before I get into this spreadsheet, and I don't want to confuse anyone, it's vitally important, once you have all those cost sheets in each category, to then rank them in terms of profitability. So let's just start with your appetizers. Let's say you've got 5 or 6 appetizers on your menu, maybe more, doesn't matter. I'm using this for illustrative purposes. You look at each one and you see what that bottom line profit is. And then I want to rank them from number 1 to number 5 or number 10, however many apps you have, in terms of highest profit to lowest profit. So the biggest profit item is number 1, the next most profitable is number 2. Put that in the upper right corner of all your cost sheets. The next thing you want to do is go to your point of sale system. Now, every point of sale has either a sales report, or some POSs call it a product mix report. And this tells you over a period of time or a date range exactly how many items you sold, meaning how many appetizers. You can zero in on the appetizers category and see that you sold 5,000 of these or 300 of those, depending on the date range. So let's just say you change your menu once a year. That means you've got 12 months of data. The more data, the better. So if you change your menu once a year, you're going to plug in a date range from yesterday going back a year in time. If you change your menu twice a year, then you've got the last 6 months to plug in. If you change it quarterly, then of course you've got 3 months of data. But again, the more data you can plug in, the better. Let's go back to the product mix or the sales report for a moment before I explain the spreadsheet you're looking at. Once you have that product mix in front of you, I want you to transfer the volume of sales, or how many of each item sold, to each individual cost sheet, category by category. So start with your appetizers, and you might have chicken wings on that particular cost sheet. Look on your product mix or your sales report, find chicken wings, see how many you sold over a year, 6 months, or even 3 months, and then write that number under the ranking number, number 1, number 2, number 3. What I just described to you. So now you've got 2 very important pieces of data. You've got by category, the most profitable to the least profitable, and then you've got volume of sales of every single item on your menu. With that information, you then plug that into this spreadsheet. Now, the spreadsheet we're looking at is cost profit analysis. It literally determines where you're making or losing money every single day in your restaurant, or the big picture over that date range of 1 year or 6 months. So look on the left. You'll see at the very top in green, this is just the entree category only. I can't show you the entire spreadsheet because that would show multiple categories. I don't want to confuse you. So for, again, illustrative purposes, I'm just showing you the entrees. So in green at the top, you'll see number 1. The biggest item in terms of profit, number 1 most profitable item in this restaurant was seafood stuffed shrimp. And every time they sold one, they made a profit of $17.88. That's a beautiful thing. You wish you made that kind of profit on every single item on your menu. I realize that's not feasible, but listen on it and see where I'm going with this. You'll see that they sold 516 of those. There's a quantity sold category right in the middle. Now, below the green, you'll see in red, abbreviated, of course, that stands for profit spread. Let me define what the spread means. Again, we're going to go in the entree category and just assume you've got, well, in this case, there's 11 different entrees. Every single one of these contributes a different profit to that restaurant. And the spread is the difference between the most profitable item and the next most profitable in descending order. Okay, follow along here. Look at number 2 in black. The number 2 most profitable item is seared scallops. Every time this restaurant sold one, they're losing a potential profit of 80 cents versus the most profitable item. Now, 80 cents is no big deal. I want every single item to be in the pennies. So 80 cents here, 95 cents there. That spread is not relevant. That's a very similar profitability, and that's the goal in each category on the menu. But as you go down in descending order, you'll see that now this restaurant is starting to lose dollars whenever lower profit items are taking sales away from what they could be selling, the higher ones above it. So look, almost a little more than halfway down the spreadsheet, highlighted in red is chicken cordon bleu. Every time the restaurant sold a chicken cordon bleu, they lost a potential profit of $6.24 against the $17.88 that they could have been making selling the seafood stuffed shrimp. Or even, the 80 cent they were losing on the seared scallops. The whole point is you want to move up the spreadsheet and not down it. Looking at the chicken cordon bleu one more time, they sold 1,805 of these. It was the number 2 most popular item, the number 2 biggest seller of all the entrees. And that lost this restaurant a potential profit of $11,263. Now, this spreadsheet, again, automatically calculates the total profit lost in descending order from the second most profitable all the way down to the least profitable. And as you can see, this restaurant over the past year lost almost $46,000 in potential profit simply because lower profit items were bigger sellers. They were more they're more popular sellers, and they took profit away from the higher profit items. That's the impact here and the key. So, to wrap this up, again, I told you this is just the entree category. Now, this is a client that I worked with several months ago, and they had every single category I mentioned. They had appetizers, they had soups and salads, they had burgers and sandwiches, they had pizzas, they had entrees, and they had desserts. They also offered all these items for lunch. So across the lunch and dinner menus, this restaurant, I'm going to tell you about this. This is the eureka moment that just hit them like a ton of bricks, and I hope it's hitting you as well. Imagine that this restaurant on an annual basis does about $2.8 million in sales. That's a decent, successful restaurant, isn't it? One location doing 2.8, almost 3 million bucks. Well, this spreadsheet in its entirety showed them that they lost a potential profit of $343,000 because in every category, lunch and dinner, lower profit items were biggest sellers, and the spread was many dollars instead of 80 cents here, 90 cents there. And that's a killer because any restaurant is paying the biggest wages, the most expensive wages in the house to the kitchen to make anything on the menu. And in some cases, restaurants are losing money selling dishes. They're not making anything on it. And those dishes are pretty popular big sellers. So that's a real big eye opener. Okay. Let's talk about what to do about that. Once you figure this out, you got some damage control to do because every single day now you're losing money in the restaurant if these lower profit items are bigger sellers. Now, the only thing you control is how you tackle this problem because it takes a little time to redesign a brand new menu. I'm going to tell you about that. That's what I call going back to the drawing board. But in the short term, the very next day, you need to think about simplifying the menu and dropping the lower profit items unless they're super popular and that your customers absolutely love them and your customers would kill you if you took them off the menu. But that's a good problem to have because that tells you that the market will bear a much higher price on that item. And people love it so much and they understand that these are changing times and that there's inflation at the gas pump, there's inflation in the supermarket, and literally you can raise the price of those items and bring it more in line with the higher profit items. If you can't do that, drop them entirely. Portion controls. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of portion controls, having a standard procedure, having a photograph of each menu item that shows what the plate presentation should look like for training purposes, a list of ingredients, and how many ingredients go on that dish when line cooks are making it so that it's uniform and consistent every time. I'm going to give you an illustrative example. My very first restaurant was a wood-fired pizzeria, and we had a big pizza line. We had a big trough full of mozzarella cheese because we made so many pizzas per week. And one day I was just watching two different people make pizzas. And one was a football player. He had a really huge hand. And then someone else had a little bit of a smaller hand, and they would literally cheese the pizza. And that football player would over cheese the pizza, and the other people on the line would put the normal amount of pizza on. And then it gets better. Pepperoni is a huge item when you have a pizzeria. And we sold so much pepperoni. It was like one of the more popular items that go on any pizza. Again, I noticed that one person was putting 10 slices of pepperoni on a pizza. One person was putting 12, and then one person literally put on 13 or 14. And I watched this happen over and over again. I went to my kitchen manager and I said, how many slices of pepperoni are supposed to go on each pizza? She said 10. I'm like, well, that tells me that two people are either adding 2 or 3 or 4 even extra slices of pepperoni every pizza they make. We sold thousands of pizzas by the end of the week. And I thought, wow, 3 extra slices of pepperoni times a couple thousand pizzas. Boy, if that's not increasing my food cost and dropping the profit on those pizzas that person made. Thus the reason for standardized portion controls. And then you need a check and balance system. Once you train everyone in the uniform, consistent procedure of making every item, then you or a manager or another employee that's close by should routinely spot check every day or so. Just routinely drop by and watch and make sure that people are complying with your portion controls. Super important. What else can you do? I mentioned the broadline suppliers. They have really, really knowledgeable sales reps. And some of these broadline suppliers, obviously they buy product in huge quantities. They have economies of scale, which means they can save you money on certain items. I used to make it a point to keep in touch with my sales rep all the time and say, listen, prices are high on this particular item. Is there anything that's comparable in quality? Maybe it's a beef dish or a chicken item or something else that's really expensive. Is there any product that you're aware of that has a very similar flavor profile and taste where if I swap it out, my guest will not know the difference? It'll taste just as great, but you bought it in a larger quantity. Therefore, the price is lower than what I'm buying from you now. You don't ask, you don't get. I can't tell you how many times we swapped items out. I always tested them first. So if your sales rep, he or her, says, yep, there's a couple different choices, or even there's just one other choice that I can give you a better price on, ask for a sample, taste it, make sure that it's not going to be noticeable by your guest and that the quality and the flavor is the same. And more than likely, it's very close and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference in a blind taste test. Okay, but think of the money you can save by routinely asking to swap product out. This is detail, but this is your bottom line we're talking about, and it's best practices. And it's advice well taken. Okay, now you know which items are the most profitable items. Now is the time to train your staff to suggest them every table, every time, such as my favorites are this or that, and suggest in every category what the most profitable items are. As long as you're proud of every single thing you're serving, and as long as it's great, why wouldn't you suggest the most profitable items? It only makes sense. Every single day, this is going to impact your bottom line. Does everyone know what a cash cow is? It's a similar, very, it's a term that most people have heard of in the restaurant business. But if you don't know what it is, a cash cow is something on the menu that has very high perceived value by your customer or your guest, meaning you put it in front of them and it has what I call wow factor. It looks great. It smells amazing. It's just got this wow factor to it, right? So immediately before people start eating it, you'll notice the cameras come out and they'll start taking pictures with their phone and they'll post it to social media. That has marketing benefits for your business. Okay, you can sell these things for really, really good money, but here's the kicker, it costs you very little to put on the plate. And you can come across many different items and you can't have too many cash cows in your restaurant because they lower your food costs and they increase your profit. Usually these are a byproduct of something that you're already selling where the price of that item is already costed out in something else. I'll give you a quick example. I had a pizzeria. We made our own dough from scratch every single day, and my pizza makers would roll out a uniform dough ball and then they'd run it through, a professional restaurant quality dough roller, and they'd get a uniform round that would then go on a pizza pan before it went into the oven. There was always an inch and a half of dough that overhung the pan, and they would take a pizza cutter, one of those pizza wheel cutter things, and they would literally trim around the edge, and then they would cut those pieces into what they would then tie into knots. Now, we all know that dough rises in the oven, so we had all these little knots that they would then bake in the oven. But first, they would brush it with olive oil. They'd sprinkle a little Parmesan cheese and a little minced garlic on them, and then they would bake up into these big knots, and they were delicious. We called them garlic knots. Well, they were absolutely free because, again, that trimming I told you about was already included in the price of the next pizza we were going to sell. The only cost I had was literally for a homemade ramekin of marinara sauce and that little sprinkle of Parmesan cheese and minced garlic, which had virtually no cost at all, and then a little bit of olive oil that we brushed on the garlic knots. So I figured, I sold this restaurant many, many years ago, but I costed it out and I figured that the ramekin of marinara sauce and those other minuscule ingredients probably at a cost of about 30 cents, and we charged $10 for the garlic knot on the menu. So $9.70 was almost pure profit every time we sold one. It was our most popular appetizer, and we sold thousands of those. That's how you make money in this business. That's how you combat rising costs and out of control labor and all that kind of stuff. Cash cows, knowing what every menu item costs you to serve, and then reducing that spread. We're almost finished. Gently raising prices is something I hope you do consistently, and you have to do this. Communication is really important. Now, just before the pandemic hits, I didn't tell you this, but I bought another restaurant just before the pandemic. I've been through all the challenges and pain points that you've gone through, and I pivoted that restaurant numerous times. But one of the biggest things that was so important to us to maintaining our business during those challenging times was regular communication with our guest. And we had to explain things that were happening, but first we had to thank them, really genuinely thank them for their business and for supporting us. And then we sort of fell on our sword saying, I know things aren't ideal right now. Costs are higher for us. Labor's crazy. And you don't have to get into too much detail, but you simply say, thank you for continuing to support our small business. And if there's anything at all that you're not satisfied with, please let me know. If anything doesn't meet your expectations, here's my email address. Contact me and I will make it right. And my guests appreciated that so much. They continued to support us and they were happy to do so, even though we had to raise prices, even though we had labor crisis problems that you're probably still dealing with. They were supportive because we kept them in the loop. Okay, that's super important. We let them know what challenges we were facing, and they just bent over backwards to keep supporting us. And that's one of the reasons why we made it through the pandemic. Okay, now back to the drawing board. Work with your chef, work with your kitchen manager, work with your broadline suppliers, and get that menu re-engineered, okay, where that spread difference is shrunk to pennies. Again, 80 cents here, 95 cents here in each category, no big deal. But when you're losing $3, $4, $5 on the appetizers and you're losing 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 on the entrees every time you sell one, no business can afford to, again, pay the highest wages in the kitchen to make anything, and especially items that you might be losing lots of dollars on. So word to the wise there. Okay, let's talk about inventory. I can't tell you how many restaurants I've worked with that think that taking inventory is simply walking around figuring out what their order is that week. No, wrong. Taking inventory means calculating the accurate and true value of your goods on hand at a given point in time so that you can figure out your true food and beverage cost. I'm going to walk you through this whole process, okay? If you don't have an inventory system in place, I'm going to give you the tools to do it, and I'm also going to show you exactly step by step how it works. So bear with me on this. We're looking at another spreadsheet. This is a food inventory spreadsheet. I'm also going to show you a beverage inventory spreadsheet. Again, this is a vastly abbreviated version because it has to fit within the screen so you can see it. But let's start with all the areas that you store food in your kitchen. There's a walk-in cooler in most restaurants. There are freezers in most restaurants. You may have stand-up refrigerators or sandwich units. You also have a dry storage area for things that are non-perishable. All the canned goods go in the dry storage area. You also have something called PARs, and I'll get to that. So let's just say I want you to put an inventory system in place. And that means you've got this spreadsheet and it is arranged now. The storage areas are arranged from top to bottom on the spreadsheet in the way that you would actually walk around taking the physical counts of the food, because you want to make this process as cost efficient and time efficient as possible. So whoever you assign to this takes less time, it's less onerous, and it's a simple procedure that once you've done it a couple of times, it becomes routine. So you'll see that things are arranged. At the top, it says cooler, then it says freezer, then it says dry storage. There might be a couple refrigerators or storage areas in between. You've got PARs at the bottom. Let me explain what PARs are. PARs are things that are prepped foods that are too onerous to count. It would take forever and the accuracy might be compromised, such as you might have a 5-gallon pot or pots of soups that are already prepped, or salad dressings. All restaurants have a shelf loaded with spices. In most cases, they're different size containers. You might have a gallon container, you might have the small containers. It would be really onerous and kind of crazy to try to count and get an accurate value of all those spices or any of the other things I mentioned. So a PAR is simply identifying what each of these things are and then assigning a fairly accurate estimate for what you believe the value of it to be at any given point in time, because you use spices, you bring new spices in on a monthly basis, and over a period of time, it averages out to be about X. The soups and salads, or salad dressings I talked about, same thing. It kind of averages out to be a certain value at any given point in time. So try your best to accurately put a value to this, and you'll see that over time, it comes out to be pretty accurate, but a lot more accurate than if you actually tried to figure out the count for all those spices, or, geez, how much is this 5-gallon, or 10-gallon pot of salad dressing? Really hard to do. So let me start from the top. Again, we're going to go back to the invoice or the order guides for every supplier that supplies you with food. Now, let's talk about arranging things. You've already arranged the refrigerators and the storage areas to make it most efficient, but let's start with the cooler. Walk-in coolers can be small or they can be very, very large, but let's just assume you've got a normal size walk-in and you open the door and you walk into it, and you may have shelves down the left wall, you may have shelves down the back wall and up the right wall, and then you may have a shelf or two in the middle in a fairly large walk-in. How would you normally do a count? I guess I would walk in the front door. I would have a clipboard and a pencil. I would have this spreadsheet in front of me, and I would go left side first, top of this shelf to the bottom, move down, top to bottom, move down, top to bottom. Then I would go to the back wall, do the same thing, from left to right, count top to bottom. And then on the right wall, same thing, top to bottom, left to right, and then finally do the middle. But do it the same way every single time, and do it in the order that you've listed things on this spreadsheet. So let's dive into the spreadsheet. Let's start with the cooler. There are only 2 items in here. You might have 30 things in your cooler, but again, I had to abbreviate. So we have red diced potato here. Someone counted that there were 6 cases, okay, in stock on the shelf. Now look in the middle. Here's where the important math comes in. We already did the simple math to figure out the menu item cost. You need to do the same thing, but from the order guide or the invoice, you simply transfer the exact information you see there in how these items come in to your kitchen. So in this case, a case of red diced potato was $20.50. There were 4 packs of 5 pounds each, and that came directly from the invoice or the order guide. All you have to do is plug in exactly what you see on the invoice or the order guide and make it consistent and put it in here. And then again, this spreadsheet automatically calculates the value. So when someone counts, I have 6 cases, it automatically multiplies $20.50 a case by 6 that you counted, and it gives you a $123 value. So you're going to go through the entire spreadsheet. This should probably take most restaurants anywhere from, say, 45 minutes to an hour to do. It shouldn't take any longer once the system is in place and you've got that system down. I recommend that 2 people take inventory. One person has the clipboard and records the information, and the other person actually does the physical counts. Let me also emphasize the importance of a check and balance and trustworthy people doing this. I recommend that the owner or the general manager, if that's you, be part of this process every once in a while so that people know that you understand the process and that no one can take advantage of you. I'll tell you why. I once gave this task to a kitchen manager so many years ago, and this person was not very good at costing out menus or even running a strong, tight financial ship in the kitchen. Amazing culinarian, put out amazingly delicious food, couldn't cost out a menu or do inventory to save his life, and I found out the hard way. But this person was artificially inflating the counts so that his food cost would come out at a really good place so that I wouldn't catch on and fire him. Well, I caught on anyway, and yes, he didn't work out. Okay, so it's very important as a check and balance that the person's doing this is trustworthy and that you understand the procedure. Again, do it methodically and also do it in the order that you would logically count things. Let me also tell you that this is a very important note to take as well. I want you to take this inventory when the inventory in your restaurant is at its absolute lowest amount. When is that? Usually after a busy weekend, right? Because most restaurants are busiest on a Friday and a Saturday and even some Sundays. So that means by Sunday night close of business, you should have virtually nothing on the shelves, and that's what speeds up the process. Imagine if you had to take your physical counts Saturday before you open for business, or even Friday before you open for the weekend. You'd be loaded for bear, and it would take you forever to do the counts. So it's only logical you take it when your inventory is at its lowest level, and usually that's a Sunday night or first thing Monday morning. Now, you're probably burnt out after working all those hours all weekend. So the best time to take inventory is Monday morning, but bright and early Monday, because you don't want the delivery trucks to start coming in and moving new merchandise in when you're trying to count what's already there. So make sure you've got adequate time Monday morning to do all your counts before the truck ever shows up, or else that's going to skew your inventory value. Very important point. Let's move on to the beverage inventory. It works exactly the same way. It's going to be arranged in the way you would count it. So most restaurants, if they have a full bar, sell lots and lots of different kinds of liquors, don't they? They've got probably 10 different kinds of vodka, including flavored vodkas. They got rums, whiskeys, scotches. They've got vermouth. They got all kinds of liquor items, do they not? So usually that's stored on the back bar in cabinets. Maybe some restaurants don't put their inventory away and they're just behind the bar and they've got extras underneath or somewhere else. So you've got to methodically count the liquor because you probably have more liquor bottles than anything else. So start there. Then you may have a cooler. If you serve draft beer, chances are you've got a cooler where the kegs are stored. You may also have stand-up refrigerators that hold bottled beers. Wines are stored either in refrigeration for white wines or room temperature for reds, and those would be in cabinets. That's the next item that you put down. And then once again, you're going to see PARs. Pars behind the bar are several things. The CO2 beer gas that pours the beer through the draft lines, those are pars. Soda bibs, those are Pepsi and Coke and Mountain Dew and Sprite and ginger ale and all those things in the big boxes that sit on a rack that get poured through a gun. You're not going to want to count those things because it's fairly inaccurate to do those counts. So we're going to assign a par to those things. And then finally, you've got fruit. You might have half a case of lemons and a full case of limes and a quarter case of oranges. And then you've got prepared fruit in those fruit containers that maybe are ready, half full or full, almost full, whatever it is. Again, you're going to assign a reasonable and accurate cost for all of those things. Let's just look really quickly at the top. A bottle of Bacardi, perhaps it's a 1.75 liter bottle because word of the wise, cost per ounce. If you can buy the biggest bottles possible and still have your bartenders pour, you're paying less per ounce for the biggest quantity. Therefore, the profits of those liquors going to be that much more if you buy a bigger bottle versus the standard 750s. I did that in my bar forever. We had as many bottles, huge as we could. Bartenders got used to pouring out of them, and it saved us a lot of money, and it increased the profitability. Know also that beverage programs are more profitable than selling food on a cost per item basis that goes out. It takes very little time to make a drink, yet every time you serve a drink now, it's $10 for this, it's $12 for that. Even glasses of wine are $12 in most restaurants and even more. So you pour a glass of wine, it's out in literally seconds versus the time it takes to cook an entree that you might make $10 or $12 or $15 on that takes 20 or 30 minutes to cook. You'll see why alcohol in a beverage program is so profitable. Okay, what do you do with this information? You're going to take inventory. I want you to take inventory 4 weeks in a row, and I'll tell you why. And what I mean by taking inventory, again, is doing the physical counts on the spreadsheet, having somebody record with the pencil on the clipboard, having the other person actually take the count and tell the information to the person writing it down. When that process is done, your office manager, your bookkeeper, or some random person that you assign that you trust can literally go into your computer on the spreadsheet and then add that in, every physical count so that the spreadsheet can automatically calculate the values. You're looking at the bottom of this spreadsheet, and the inventory grand total is $1,121. That's a critical number because let's just say this is the very first time you took this inventory. I want you to take it 1 week later and then do it again 1 week later and then do it again 1 week later. Why do we do this? Because you need to find a consistency, what I call your sweet spot. Let's just say you take the count this week and then take it again the following week. 2 weeks of data determines one food or beverage cost. Let's just say you want a 30% food cost as your ideal target. Let's just say the first time you take inventory, you take it again a week later, and then you calculate your food cost, and I'm going to show you how to do that next, and you come up with a 36% food cost. And then you take it a week later, and now you got a 32. And then you take it 1 week after that, and now you got a 26 or a 28. You don't know what your food cost is. You've got 3 different numbers. You got 28, you got 36, you got 32. It's all over the place. Maybe you've got a waste problem, a theft problem, a spoilage problem. You need to take inventory 4 weeks in a row so that you consistently get 30, 30 and a half, 29 and a half. There's your sweet spot, okay? Then when you get that consistency, you don't have a waste, a theft, or a spoilage problem, and you're making no mistakes. When you get to that sweet spot, you've taken it 4 weeks in a row, and you're satisfied with the consistency, then and only then do you go to take a monthly inventory. And now you don't have to do it every week anymore. And the only time you have to go back to a weekly inventory is if 2 months in a row you get 2 wildly varying numbers, and then you know that something wrong is amiss and you need to investigate. But in my restaurants, it's like I did the 4-week thing. I got that sweet spot. I let people know I was watching. It's like we spot checked and we spot counted things. We eliminated 90% of the theft. We had very little waste and spoilage, and we hit that sweet spot. Now I want to show you how you calculate your food and your beverage cost. It's another spreadsheet, but it's all part of this system of cost controls. Okay, this spreadsheet is uniform for your food, your liquor, your beverage, anything. You'll have one specific one for food. You'll have another one specific for beverage. You don't cross-contaminate the two, but essentially the spreadsheet looks identical, and you can use the same spreadsheet to do your beverage or your food first and then the other second. Okay, there's a formula here, and the basic formula is beginning inventory plus purchases minus ending inventory equals usage divided by sales equals your food or your beverage cost. I'm going to define all those terms. I don't mean to confuse you, but I'm going to walk you through this. What is beginning inventory? Beginning inventory is the absolute first time you do the physical count on that spreadsheet where you've entered everything into the computer. And maybe if it's food we're talking about, you did it for the very first time. And that bottom line total on that inventory spreadsheet might be $5,000. It might be $10,000. It depends on the size of your restaurant. Now, I told you you're going to do this a couple weeks in a row. The very next week that you take it for the second time is now your ending inventory, because we're talking about a period. An inventory period is a full week of time. So your beginning inventory is the very first Monday morning that you took the count. And then 1 week later, Monday morning, before the trucks come in, that's your ending inventory. What happens in the middle? I already told you, your delivery trucks show up, and that's in the middle of the spreadsheet. You'll see purchases. You want to write down the date that different vendors delivered different products in your restaurant. So you'll see here, it's August 4th, August 5th, and August 7th. We took in 3 deliveries that week from different vendors. Vendor 1, $450 worth of food. Vendor 2, $1,020. Vendor 3, $675. This is really important. Invoices. We talked about the food invoices. It's really funny how some of the broadline suppliers will literally throw multiple different items together on your invoice that aren't the same or related. What do I mean by that? You might have 3 or 4 different food items, and then you'll see rubber gloves in there. And then you'll see 1 or 2 more food items, then you'll see soda straws, and then you'll see mop heads. What you need to do is separate out all of those things that are not food, things that are not edible, things you don't serve your guests need to be separated out of the invoice. Yes, it takes a little time. So what do I suggest? Talk to your supplier, tell them to go to their computer or, IT department and have that item invoice reordered so that all the food is in one category, your supplies are in another category, your beverage items are in another category, so you don't have to pull this out to get an accurate count. I can't tell you how many restaurants took inventory and I sort of looked at what they did and I found glaring mistakes. It's like, no, mop heads and paper towels and cellophane wrap are not part of the food. You're artificially inflating your inventory value when you include anything that isn't edible that is not served to a customer. So word to the wise there. Okay, let's move on. I'm going to define those other terms now. Ending inventory is the second week in a row on a Monday that you took that very same count, and you might have gotten another value, okay? And then what is usage? Food cost and usage are one and the same. Okay, so usage is every single item that you sold to a guest for full price. Every single item that you sold to a staff person at half price. Every single thing that you might have cooked for the kitchen because they got free food. Every single thing that got wasted or spoiled or thrown in the trash or got stolen out the back door. Every single item that you had to comp a guest because they weren't satisfied with it. Any mistake that was made. All of that combined is your true food cost, okay? That's usage. And it automatically is calculated on the spreadsheet. Okay, what are sales? Food sales only in this case. If you were doing a beverage spreadsheet, you wouldn't include food items when you did your purchases. You would only include beverage items, okay? So sales, when you go to your product mix report for that week, you're going to only enter food sales only. You're only going to enter beverage sales only for that sales figure on the spreadsheet. All right. Date range, super important. Let me clarify. Your very first beginning inventory was a Monday morning. Now, when you plug in a date range for sales, okay, Sales has a date range to it. You're going to count Monday because you're counting in the morning, and then maybe food came in the door from your suppliers, and then you were open for business. Probably you sold food, maybe for lunch, you sold food for dinner. Okay, so you're going to count Monday night sales, you're going to count Tuesday night end of day sales, Wednesday end of day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's 7 full days: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? And Sunday. But you're not going to count the following Monday. Make that really, really clear, because if you counted that extra Monday, it's going to skew this, and it's going to give you a much lower food cost than what is real. Okay, so that's very important also. So let's go through the formula one more time. Beginning inventory plus purchases. The subtotal halfway down the spreadsheet is the total of those purchases. So your beginning inventory of 5,345 gets added to the sum total of your purchases of 2,145. That gives you a total of 7,490. Now you're subtracting the ending inventory, which is a week's later physical count, of 4,023, and now the spreadsheet automatically calculates that usage, $3,467. You plug in $10,000 of food sales only for that 7-day date range, Monday through Sunday, and now the spreadsheet automatically does the math and divides $3,467 by $10,000 of sales. And now your food cost here is 34.6, or you might as well say 35%. Again, do this process for both food and your beverage program every single week for 4 weeks. And let's hope that your sweet spot is 34, 34.5, 34, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in a row. Then you can, then and only then you go to a 1-month inventory. And if you did this every month, but you were losing money every single day for 30 days, it would take you 30 days to figure out that you were losing money. So never, ever start by just doing once a month, because you could be losing money every month. Okay, let's talk about labor costs, because labor is the second biggest expense in your restaurant. Now, I used to calculate this weekly. This is another spreadsheet. I strongly recommend that you also track this weekly. Let's look at the top, Christmas week, 12/20 to 12/26. There are 2 different line items here. That's total sales and total labor, and then kitchen sales and kitchen labor. Why did I track both? Well, one, I wanted to know what my overall sales and labor cost was against those sales. But I also wanted to track the kitchen, because again, the kitchen labor are the most expensive wages you're paying to anyone in the place, right? It's crazy these days. Line cooks are making $22 an hour, right? You know what I'm talking about. So it's really important to track your labor cost in the kitchen as well, because that's your highest labor. And if you find an abuse, you got to zero in on it. Okay, so let's look at the top again, that top line, 12/20 to 12/26. Sales were 54,000 and change that week, and your payroll cost against that was 14,605. The labor cost was really good. 27% labor cost is really good, right? In any economy, that's great. Kitchen labor is always going to be higher. I mentioned that. And you had $22,000 worth of food only sales here. Okay, make a note of that. Food only sales when we're talking about the kitchen. And then kitchen labor only that comes right off your payroll report was 7,087. The math there automatically calculated a 32% labor cost only in the kitchen. Now in green, here's where the sweet spot comes in. Now 27 and 32% costs were pretty good, but I show you here in green that a couple of weeks later, this restaurant did even better. Okay, the sales were almost identical. Look at that, 54,102 overall sales versus 54,202. It was off by $100. But look, the labor cost was much less and dropped the labor cost by 1 point. If you lower your labor cost by 1 point every single week all year, you're saving yourself lots of money. So what does the green show you? Well, it shows you that you are able to find a sweet spot and do absolute better. That means that you had just enough staff on so that they weren't overwhelmed, and that the guests still had a quality experience, but it was the most efficient allocation of labor possible in this restaurant. That's your goal. That tells you that this is possible. Now, you want to always compare apples to apples, and that's why I suggest you take copious notes every single day. And I'm not saying you have to do it, but have your hosts make a note, or your general manager, or your dining room leader, or anyone who's in a position of authority or responsibility can make notes. What happened that day? Did it snow? Did it rain? Did you get an unexpected bus group that came in? Did you open an hour later, an hour earlier? You want to be able to compare apples to apples, because if you get a lower, labor cost, some of those things may have impacted it. Okay, so very, very important. So this just shows that you can reach a sweet spot, and now you've got a benchmark to shoot for. You want to shoot for a 26% labor cost every single week and a 31% labor in the kitchen. Now, there's also a separate spreadsheet available that I'll tell you about later that really zeroes in on the kitchen labor, because it is expensive. If you find out that suddenly your kitchen labor spikes, you need to figure out why. You can literally go to every position from line cook to prep cook to dishwasher, have each individual person listed by their hours worked that week and their wages compared to that sweet spot. And then you can go to your kitchen manager, or your chef, or even you yourself, watch what's going on and see if there are any abuses in the kitchen, and figure out why labor in the kitchen spiked by the individual positions. It's glaringly obvious on the spreadsheet once you have these tools to do that. Okay, time change authorization, another spreadsheet that's part of the system. Know that there are lots of labor abuses in your restaurant, seemingly innocent by the people doing it. I'm going to give you an example. A long time ago, I recognized that I had 55 employees, full and part-time, in my biggest restaurant. And I noticed that 32 or 33 of them every single week were punching in early. How did I figure this out? Well, I used to do the payroll. I didn't do the processing, but I assembled the payroll documents for my payroll company, and then I sent it to the payroll company. But one of the things I noticed, two things that you may or may not be aware of. The first thing is, a point of sale system is how most people clock into restaurants today. And if somebody forgets to punch out, you may not even be aware of this. I've seen lots of restaurants that had no clue about this. If somebody forgets to punch out, and let's just say they left at 9 p.m. that night, the point of sale system has absolutely no idea that they were supposed to clock out at 9 p.m. So every point of sale system does a compilation of the daily data every single night. It's called a grind. And usually that happens very, very early after the close of business, but very, very early in the morning when no one's in the restaurant. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes 4 a.m., which tells you that if someone forgets to clock out at 9 p.m., the system is going to pay them until 2 or 3 in the morning, which could be 6 or 7 more hours that you're paying them that they didn't actually work. Think of how much money that costs you if you have 5 people a week forgetting to clock out more than one day. That's the first thing to check. What I also used to do was I'd pull the schedules for the kitchen and the front of house, and I would compare the punch-in times as I was doing payroll to the time the person was supposed to punch in. That's when I noticed that 32 or 33 people out of 55 were clocking in early. So I decided to watch. What's the very first thing people do? They walk in the back door, the front door, they go right to that point of sale, and they type in their number and they clock in, don't they? And then I watched all these people. They would go hang up their coat. Then the ladies would go into the ladies' room, and they'd come out and they'd have lipstick on, and they will have done their makeup for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever. Then people would go to the bar because we had a free soda privilege, and they'd pour themselves a soda. And then I'd watch them chit chat with their friends, and then they'd finally go to work. But they came in 15 minutes early in some cases, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, times 32 people. So I had to put a stop to it because that was all unproductive time. But I knew that there were certain times that was authorized times that a manager or even myself would call someone in early because, as you can see on this spreadsheet, Mary Kate Smith had a bus group set up. And maybe someone got called in to do the dishes because they didn't get finished the night before. Yes, there are legitimate times, but when those legitimate times happen, I made it clear that the employee who is called in early was absolutely responsible to put their name on this time change authorization sheet. Now, these were posted throughout the restaurant. There was one in the bar, there was one in the front of house at the, the server stations, there was one at the host station, there was one in the kitchen. And this is how it worked. If your manager called you in early, you had to put the scheduled time that you were supposed to come in per the schedule and the actual time you were asked to come in, and then put a reason why, and then make sure your manager initialed it and signed off on it. And I told people that when I did payroll at the end of the week, if you punched in early, but your name didn't appear on one of those time change sheets, then you would not be paid for the time. And then you folks can simply go into the point of sale system, and you have every legal right to do so. You can edit their punch in times, provided you communicate this information, and this is your policy. You can edit the time from 15 minutes early to the time the schedule actually says they're supposed to be there. This saved me hundreds of dollars over the course of a month, sometimes even more than that during the holiday busiest periods. But depending on the number of employees you have, the more money you can save. But we had really good benefits and really good perks, and we paid great wages, and we really recognized, and we had regular recognition and rewards programs. That was the benefit of working for us. We had a great company culture. But there can't be abuses, even if it is seemingly, innocent, and people understood, and that eliminated this problem. Okay, let's talk about daily break even. This is pretty important too. A daily break even is recognizing that every single day in your restaurant, it costs you the same amount of money to open the doors. That means you put the key in the lock, you open the doors, you turn the lights on, you've got a staff ready to serve the guests, you got food in the walk-ins ready to cook, whatever it is, and everything is ready to go, whether you serve 5 people for lunch and dinner or breakfast, or however many day parts you're open, or 500 people, or somewhere in the middle. It doesn't matter. You have a cost involved. Now, that cost is related to 2 different kinds of costs or expenses, and I'm going to explain what each means. There are 2 different kinds of costs. There are fixed costs and there are variable costs. What's the difference? A fixed cost is something that you have to pay, your restaurant has to pay, whether you're open 5 days a week, 7 days a week, or closed during a pandemic for months at a time. It doesn't matter. You have a mortgage to pay if you own the property. You have rent to pay to a landlord. He doesn't care if you're closed. He doesn't care if you're open 3 days, 5 days, or 7 days. He wants his rent, and it's $3,000 a month. That's a fixed cost. You have to pay it regardless of your open hours and open days. Insurances, same things. The dumpster in the parking lot. The dumpster company doesn't care if you're open 5 days or not open at all. It's still going to cost you $400 a month. Know that every one of these costs shows up on an invoice. You might have a bookkeeper. You might have an accounting manager. You might have a CPA. You might have an office manager. You might have an old school file cabinet, or everything might be in the cloud. Doesn't matter. Someone needs to assemble every single invoice that comes in either by the week or by the month, and then figure all these things out and list them on another spreadsheet. It's also part of our system I'll tell you about later. Okay, what's a variable cost? The exact opposite of a fixed cost. A variable cost is something that goes up or down depending on open hours and open days. The biggest things, of course, are your cost of goods, your food costs, and your labor cost. They go up or down depending on how many days you're open, okay? So your food costs and your payroll costs are going to be higher if you're open 7 days a week than if you're open 5 or 3 or 4 days a week. What else? Heating oil, electricity, all those things are variable. So again, once you've got a whole stack of invoices, either off the computer and you're simply writing the information down, or you've got them physical in front of you, okay, you need to figure out on a monthly basis what all these things cost you, whether they're fixed or variable. I would arrange them in a stack of fixed followed by a stack of variable. Some things do cost you by the month. You get one bill per month for your dumpster, your lease, or your mortgage payment. Your insurance might be paid in advance, 6 months or a full year in advance, and then you divide by 6 months or 12 months. But you've got to come up with a monthly figure for these things. And then the spreadsheet, if you choose to take advantage of it later, it literally breaks everything down by 30 days, automatically divides by 30. So your daily break even is the bottom line. It's the sum total of all of your fixed and variable costs at the end of a month divided by 30. And that might tell you that your restaurant, it might cost you $900 every single day to open that restaurant. It might cost you $5,000 to open if you get a huge place. But what exactly does the daily break even mean? It means it's the amount of sales where you're not making any profit and you're not losing any money. It's literally right in the middle where it washes out. So here's the kicker. A lot of restaurants have had to close a couple of days or even one day, okay, due to labor staffing and shortages and that problem we talked about earlier. You need to figure out what day makes the most sense to close. A lot of restaurants just randomly say, I just feel like closing on a Wednesday. But they might make more money on a Wednesday than on a Monday, but they wouldn't know that unless they did this exercise. So it's vitally important to figure out what your break even is. And then you look at your sales reports for consistency again. If you look at 3 or 4 weeks of sales and you're consistently on a Monday or a Wednesday or a Sunday below that daily break even figure, that's the day to close. But the very first thing you do is you try to come up with a special promotion or something that's going to drive business. Even if you have a loss leader or some hook or whatever it is, where you're going to make the money up in profit on selling more drinks or whatever it is, and I can help you with that too. That's the only reason why you wouldn't close on those days. But if you're having a staffing shortage, then you probably have to close. And that's why it's important to figure out what day makes the most sense to close. And know this, the bottom line is this. If you are consistently under that daily break-even amount on, say, a Monday, then it makes more sense to close because you will lose less money being closed than opening the doors, turning the lights on, bringing the people in, and waiting for things to happen that don't happen. And then you ring $800 when your break even is $950 and it happens every Monday. That's the reason for the daily break even. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about empowerment. I'm a huge believer in the difference between leadership and management. Let's start there. Anyone can call themselves a manager. Anyone can be promoted to manager, but that doesn't mean that they're competent or they're experienced or they make good decisions, okay? There are good managers out there, sure, but there's lots of terrible ones too. What's the difference between a leader and a manager? A leader has experience. A leader is competent. A leader leads by example and isn't too important to do the dirty jobs and let the other staff or team members see them, that they're part of the team. You don't have to do it all the time. You just notice something and then you do it. And then you can obviously ask someone else to do it too, but not being a figurehead, being one of the team. That's leading by example. And here's the important part. Then you nurture, you develop, you recognize and reward people. You give them more responsibility if they can handle it, or you think they can handle it because you think they are using good judgment. You recognize and reward that achievement, but you also give them room to make mistakes and even fail. And then you don't criticize, you give them a positive reinforcement of what they may have done right and where it went wrong. And then you develop their talents. And then pretty soon you've got a pretty powerful person that doesn't want to let you down, that acts like they own the place. They treat the business with respect as if they owned it, and then they're recognized and rewarded to do something about it. That's called empowerment, folks, okay, versus delegation. Managers delegate. Anybody can tell somebody what to do and even how to do it, but very few leaders are, if you were to look at your competitors, chances are they call people managers, and some of them are okay, and some of them are good, and some of them are not competent at all, and they delegate. They tell people what to do. You want to have leaders in your organization that empower people and make them rise to the challenge. Okay. So we used to bonus our managers. We used to give bonuses for meeting certain key objectives, okay? Key results, I called them. You might have someone create a loyalty program. Maybe that's your general manager. You might have a head host create a takeout and delivery program. You might have your kitchen manager create catering, parties, and private events. Maybe the dining room manager does that. Your kitchen manager and your bar manager, and I'm using the word manager again when I should be saying leader. If your leaders can lower your costs by staying in that sweet spot I talked about, It would be so great to incentivize them for staying in the sweet spot. Or maybe your bar leader creates a mug club, which is super profitable. And I can tell you about that at the end of the presentation as well. Your kitchen leader might create those cash cows we talked about. Ordering efficiency. If someone orders really efficiently where you don't run out of product that are really profitable to sell, but you don't order too much product that gets thrown away because it perishes, that's called ordering efficiency. That saves you money. That increases your profits. That's something to incentivize a kitchen leader to do. Coming up with off the menu specials is super important also. These are higher profit items than your regular menu items that give your staff something to talk about, that usually sell very, very well if they're described. All these things are ideas where you can up-level your organization, empower future leaders in your business, and then recognize and reward them for achievement. Oops. All right. Efficiencies and best practices. This was something that worked really well for me in all my restaurants. Once a month, I used to gather the whole team together in the dining room, and we'd have a series of flip charts and dry erase markers. And I challenged the people, anyone that worked for me, dishwasher, host, busser, bartender, it didn't matter. We were all together for about 30 minutes. And I simply challenged people to throw out any idea, crazy idea or not. No idea was a crazy idea. Just write it down. If you've got an idea that you think will make this place run better, and these people are in a great position because they work there every day, they see things. But if you don't ask them, they won't tell you. We used to ask people, is there a way that you see working every day that we might improve our business, either making something more profitable or cutting costs or maintaining our equipment or whatever it is? Throw it out there. People would get up and they'd take a dry erase marker and they'd write on the dry erase board or on the flip chart, right? At the end of the 30 minutes, I probably had 10 or 15 of these things filled with ideas. I told my people, listen, if I can track these ideas, I'm going to look at the ones that I think are the most realistic, and I'm going to pick 4 or 5 of these ideas out of the 30 or 40 that are on the board. And if I think I can track them, meaning I can figure out how much profit they're going to deliver to the restaurant or how much money it's going to save us. And if I execute one of these ideas and then I track it for a while, and if it does prove to give us more profit or lower our costs, then I'm going to give you a bonus percentage every single month you work for me, as long as it continues to deliver a return on that investment. Wow, that's empowerment, isn't it? I had people that worked for me for 12, 15, 18 years, and believe it or not, some of those ideas they came up with many, many years ago, they were still getting a bonus on every single month as long as they continue to work in my restaurant. What a nice incentive that was. What a great idea, right? Because it had a return on investment. So it could be a new marketing idea that drives new business. It could be new profit centers, like, the private party thing I talked about. Cost savings, preventative maintenance. If we could track the return on investment, then that equals the reward. Now, some restaurants might say, why would I want to gather 20 or 30 people for a half an hour? That's going to cost me money. That's a limited way of thinking. When people think of things in terms of the cost versus an investment, over the nearly 3 decades I ran these restaurants, I can't put a dollar figure to the amount of extra profit that these ideas generated by people that worked for me contributed to my bottom line over many, many, many years, that I continued to track and that these people made bonus and incentive money on. It was just a win-win-win. The guest won, the staff person won, the restaurant won. I mean, strong program. So there's an idea for you. Okay, let's talk about labor costs. These are the highest wages we're paying now. Crazy money, right? Across the board in your restaurant. Research and tenacity was really, really important through the pandemic. I told you I bought a restaurant before the pandemic. Well, I was absolutely diligent in finding out about every single government program and every single free money grant and paycheck protection program and every single thing. I was literally the first to hear about it because I was tenacious in learning about these things. And then I was also dropping everything else because nothing was more important than getting this money. And I realized that even though it seemed like a huge amount of money with the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of restaurants that were eligible for these things, if you weren't first in line to press the go button and do the research and then fill out, the forms on the computer and submit the applications, you weren't going to get that money. And it's really sad to see how many businesses failed that could have got hundreds of thousands of dollars in money that they didn't have to pay back simply because they were too busy running their restaurants and not busy prioritizing that this might be their salvation. Okay. So even today, there are some programs that are still available to you that you need to keep your ear to the ground. I always recommend that, restaurants join their state restaurant association because they're the very first people to find out about these new programs. And then once a new program is announced, then figure out exactly when those programs are released to you so that you can apply for them and be first in line, folks. Let's talk about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. That came out a year and a half or so ago, and it was a lot of money, but it quickly ran out of money. And then months ago, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, at the end of the summer, we found out Nation's Restaurant News published the story that there was still $83 million left in that fund that was not distributed that they were then going to distribute. And how were they going to do that? Well, it was only eligible to those restaurants that applied for it and didn't get it. And it was some kind of random bingo or lottery situation. But then I was recommending to my clients and people I came in contact with to pick up the phone, and I encouraged them to call the Small Business Administration. And if they didn't already have a relationship with the SBA, their banker did. Make some phone calls, network, figure out who a decision maker was at the local SBA office in the next biggest city near you, and say, listen, I applied for this and I'm struggling to keep my business going. And I would really like any influence you have to help me get any of those remaining dollars. And some restaurants did that, and the squeaky wheel got the grease, and they might have gotten $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever, but it was still better than getting nothing because you sat there waiting for things to happen versus making things happen. So now, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is being re-explored. I just heard that Congress is trying to establish a new fund because they realize that the restaurant industry is still struggling because of the labor costs and because of the inflation and all this stuff. And there may, in fact, be another bill that is passed that releases another huge amount of money. So you got to find out about this and apply for it, and apply early. Now, the next one, the Employee Retention Tax Credit, is absolutely available to every restaurant, and absolutely you will get it. You will not, this won't run out of money, and if you apply late, it may take you longer to get it, but you can still get it. Let me explain to you if you haven't heard about what this is. During the pandemic, during 2020, there were 4 quarters. January, February, March, April, May, June. Those are all quarters, right, during 2020. And then the 3rd and 4th quarter, where the pandemic affected business. If you can prove that you had less than 500 employees, most of us do, right, unless we're much bigger businesses. If you prove that you had a partial or a complete shutdown during the pandemic, if you could prove that you had a drop in sales during the pandemic, then you qualify. You paid payroll taxes on every single employee during each of those quarters. Same thing for the first 3 quarters of 2021. If you had employees and you paid these payroll taxes, you can get a certain amount of dollars back, a large amount of money back for every single employee that was on your payroll during those 7 quarters. It's a little bit challenging to do this paperwork, and I don't recommend you try to do it yourself unless you're familiar with the 941 forms and all these payroll tax filings that happen through your payroll company usually. Well, now you need a specialist to do this. And there are special companies, accounting firms mostly, that are specializing in recovering this money. How much could it be? It could be $200,000 or $300,000. If you had 10 employees for every single one of those quarters working for you, you could get up to $250,000 back. It may take a couple of months to get it, but you have to get it. All right, so how do you do it? If you're interested, you can email me, Roger, R-O-G-E-R, at restaurantrockstars.com, and I'll put you in touch with a firm that will recover this money for you. They will do all the heavy lifting. They will fill out the paperwork and they will help you get the money back. You do not have to pay a dime to them until you receive your money. Now, most of these firms out there are charging anywhere between 15 and 20% of the amount they actually recover for the restaurant. But let's face it, I would pay $20,000 or $30,000 all day long if I could get 250 or 300 or $400,000 back. I'd do that all day, right? And again, you don't have to pay it up front. It's too onerous to do yourself. So do yourself a favor, get that money back and do whatever it takes to get your employee retention tax credit money back. Okay, let's talk about trade for services. You've got employees you want to incentivize. It only makes sense to trade for services to save money. You don't want to pay cash on cash for things when someone's willing to trade. There are lots of businesses, small businesses like yours, that love to take their wives or their partners out for dinner. They don't want to pay the check. They feel like a VIP if they can just sign the check. Okay, so you can literally trade them for services and give them a certain amount of value. You can load a gift card, give it to them, or keep it behind the counter, and they don't have to pay for their dinner, and you get linen service or fresh flowers or a variety of things. Again, you don't ask, you don't get. Here's another idea. Trade gift cards for gift cards. That means you go to a bunch of non-competing businesses in your area that are not restaurants. Maybe it's a tanning salon, maybe it's a car wash, maybe it's a movie theater, maybe it's a convenience store that sells gas. You trade gift cards because it only costs you pennies on the dollar. Let's just say your food cost is 30%. That means for every dollar, you're only giving 30 cents in hard cost to yourself to give someone else $1 in value. So I used to always give about, $10, $25 gift cards to these competing businesses saying, yeah, I'll give you a $25 gift card to my business if you give me a couple of $25 gift cards from your business. And now I've got prizes and incentives to give to my team that don't cost me a full buck. It was amazing. And then, of course, maximizing profit on every sale. We already covered that by figuring out what your menu cost, the plate cost was for every item, knowing which items were the most profitable, and then figuring out and training your staff to recommend those. That's maximizing profit on every sale. And then there was that elaborate exercise of analyzing the profit of each item in each category and seeing where you're losing money every month and putting a stop to it. Okay, and then redesigning that menu. That's what maximizing profit is. These are the systems, the financial systems that'll put money to your bottom line. But the bottom line is being resourceful, turning over every rock. I've got something called the Restaurant Rockstars podcast. You can subscribe absolutely free. I recommend you go to my website, restaurantrockstars.com, and on any page, you can simply sign up or opt in, give us your email address, and no, we won't spam you, but you will get the podcast in your inbox every single week. We record it as a video and an audio because some people like to watch the guest and listen while they watch, and some people like to listen while they're driving to work or walking the dog. You can also subscribe for free: Spotify, Stitcher,